Malcolm Young was never the loudest voice in AC/DC, nor was he the one the cameras sought out after every electrifying concert. While Angus ran across the stage in his schoolboy outfit, duck-walking like a possessed demon of rock, Malcolm stood just off to the side, guitar slung low, pounding away with relentless rhythm. Yet for all his quiet demeanor, Malcolm was the architect, the backbone, the true heartbeat of AC/DC. And when he finally allowed himself to confess some of the truths he carried about the band's rise, the music industry, and the demons that lurked within, those confessions revealed darker secrets than most fans could ever imagine. Behind the power chords, the roaring amps, and the thunderous applause, AC/DC's journey was built on sacrifice, obsession, and shadows that Malcolm himself admitted often haunted him. His words gave a glimpse into the reality behind one of rock's most untouchable legends. It all began in the working-class suburbs of Sydney, Australia. The Young family, originally from Scotland, had immigrated there in 1963, bringing with them a rough and ready grit that would one day power one of the biggest bands in rock history. Malcolm and Angus were just kids when they first picked up guitars, but from the beginning, there was a fire burning inside them, an urgency to escape the factory life, the dead-end jobs, and the suffocating grind of working-class reality. Malcolm confessed later that he knew there was no plan B. Either the band would work, or he'd be stuck in a cycle he couldn't accept. That desperate hunger pushed them harder than most bands could endure, and it created an energy that audiences couldn't resist. Yet Malcolm also admitted that from day one, AC/DC was never just about joy and music. It was about survival. That survival instinct would shape every dark twist of the story. Then in 1973, everything shifted when Malcolm and Angus formed AC/DC, pulling together a group that would soon shock the Australian pub scene with a ferocity no one had seen before. Malcolm confessed years later that those early pub gigs were brutal, fights breaking out in the audience, broken bottles flying, and the band often playing behind wire mesh to protect themselves. They were playing for miners, dockworkers, and hardened men who didn't want polished pop. They wanted sweat, power, and volume. And that's exactly what AC/DC gave them. But Malcolm would admit that it was during this era that the band first learned the dark side of music, the drinking culture, the violence, and the sense that they had to out-crazy everyone else just to survive. It wasn't just performance. It was warfare. By 1975, AC/DC had landed their first taste of real success with albums like High Voltage and TNT, but Malcolm revealed that behind the scenes, it wasn't the fairy tale most fans imagined. The Young brothers were already pushing themselves to extremes, writing constantly, rehearsing endlessly, and demanding perfection from everyone around them. Malcolm confessed that this obsession with control and perfection created tensions that almost ripped the band apart even in the early days. He was honest about his role. He admitted that his own stubbornness and refusal to compromise often created enemies, but he believed that without that hard edge, AC/DC would never have broken through. That relentlessness was both their secret weapon and their curse. Then in 1977, the cracks began to show. The band's rise in the UK and Europe was growing, but internally, battles with record labels, management, and producers revealed the darker side of the business. Malcolm confessed that they were treated like disposable products, told how to dress, what songs to cut, and what image to sell. But the Young brothers refused. Malcolm made it clear AC/DC would live or die on their own terms. That decision came with consequences, burning bridges in the industry and fueling their reputation as difficult rebels. Yet Malcolm admitted with pride that this was the only way to keep the soul of the band intact. Still, he also admitted there were costs, money fights, exhaustion, and the endless cycle of tour that began eating away at their sanity. Then in 1980, everything changed when tragedy struck. Bon Scott, their larger-than-life frontman, died in London after a night of heavy drinking. Malcolm confessed that this was the darkest moment of his life in the band's history. The guilt, the grief, and the uncertainty almost destroyed them. He admitted that he and Angus considered walking away completely, believing the spirit of AC/DC had died with Bon. Yet it was Malcolm who pushed through, who said that the only way to honor Bon was to keep going, to channel that pain into something unstoppable. The result was Back in Black, one of the greatest rock albums ever recorded, but Malcolm confessed that even its triumph was bittersweet. Behind the millions of records sold, there was still a deep wound, one that Malcolm admitted never fully healed. What fans didn't see was the darker coping mechanisms that began to take hold. Malcolm admitted that during the relentless tour of the 1980s, the band often drowned themselves in alcohol just to numb the pressure and the pain. The parties, the chaos, and the excess became legendary, but Malcolm's confessions revealed the truth. Much of it wasn't fun. It was survival, a way to escape the crushing loneliness of life on the road. Malcolm's confessions also revealed just how much of AC/DC's sound and vision was built on conflict. He admitted that fights between the brothers could get brutal, but they always knew that the music came first. Still, Malcolm confessed that those fights often left scars, both emotional and physical. He spoke of nights where the anger spilled over, only to be patched up on stage the next day as if nothing had happened. The dark secret of AC/DC wasn't just drugs or excess. It was the endless cycle of pressure, conflict, and sacrifice that no one outside the band could ever truly see. By the early 1990s, AC/DC had become a global institution, the kind of band that could sell out arenas in any country, any night of the week. But Malcolm Young confessed that by this point, the band's public image of unstoppable power was masking a far more fragile reality. The truth, he admitted, was that the years of touring, the constant grind, and the lingering shadows of Bon Scott's death had left wounds that never fully closed. He revealed that he often questioned how much longer they could carry on, not because the fans had abandoned them, but because the human cost of maintaining that machine was greater than anyone outside the band could truly grasp. For Malcolm, each show was both a triumph and a burden. The roar of the crowd was intoxicating, but the silence after was suffocating. Then in 1990, when the band released The Razor's Edge, featuring the iconic Thunderstruck, the world saw a revitalized AC/DC. Yet Malcolm later admitted that behind the scenes, things were not as triumphant as they appeared. While Angus thrived in the spotlight, Malcolm was privately battling the weight of his own expectations and the creeping shadow of burnout. He confessed that writing the riffs that drove AC/DC's music had become both a blessing and a curse. Every album brought the pressure to deliver something monumental, and Malcolm revealed that sometimes the riffs came easily, but other times he tortured himself for months, feeling like he was failing the very band he had built. It was a dark reality. The fans heard thunderous, effortless power, but Malcolm himself felt chained to an endless cycle of self-doubt and pressure. Malcolm also opened up about the unspoken rules that governed AC/DC's internal world. He confessed that loyalty within the band was absolute, but it came with a cost. Once you were part of the AC/DC family, you were either all in or you were out. He admitted that this unforgiving philosophy led to brutal decisions, like the firing of longtime drummer Phil Rudd during the mid-1980s after his drug problems became impossible to ignore. Malcolm revealed that those decisions tore him apart. Phil had been a brother, a key part of the AC/DC sound, but the band's survival always came first. It was a ruthless truth that most fans never saw. The band was not just a group of friends playing music, it was a war machine, and Malcolm often felt the blood was on his hands. Then in 1995, everything seemed to turn around with Ballbreaker, their first album with Phil Rudd back on drums after a decade-long absence. To the fans, it was a triumphant return, a reminder of AC/DC's classic power. But Malcolm confessed that this reunion was bittersweet. He admitted that by this point, the years of hard living had aged all of them, and he could see the toll it had taken on Phil in particular. Yet there was also a dark bond between them. They had all been through the wars, and there was an unspoken understanding that none of them were the same men they had been 20 years earlier. Malcolm later confessed that he often looked at the band on stage during this era and wondered how much longer they could truly keep it up. Then in 2003, when Black Ice sessions were looming, Malcolm's confessions took an even darker turn. He admitted privately that the drinking he had once relied on to cope had become a prison. By this point, he had quietly sought help, but the years of abuse had already left their scars. Malcolm revealed that he struggled with memory lapses and moments of frightening confusion, even while writing or rehearsing. To outsiders, AC/DC still looked invincible, but Malcolm's confessions made it clear he was beginning to slip. And yet, true to his character, he refused to let anyone see it. He forced himself through sessions, hiding his struggles, determined to keep the band alive. What Malcolm revealed about this period was chilling. He admitted that by the early 2000s, the band was no longer a family just trying to survive. It had become a corporation, a global empire with endless demands. Tours were no longer just about music. They were about millions of dollars, contracts, and obligations. Malcolm confessed that this transformation weighed heavily on him. The raw joy of plugging in his guitar and hammering out riffs had been buried under logistics, lawyers, and managers. He felt that the soul of AC/DC was at risk of being suffocated by its own success, a dark irony that haunted him in his final years with the band. Then in 2010, the world saw AC/DC at its commercial peak again with the massive Black Ice World Tour. Stadiums packed, fans roaring, the young brothers side by side. But behind that curtain, Malcolm's health was unraveling. His confessions revealed the private torment of this era, moments where he forgot chords, forgot lyrics, even forgot entire songs he himself had written. He admitted to close friends that he feared he was losing the very thing that had defined his life. The dark secret was now undeniable. Malcolm Young, the indestructible rhythm guitarist of AC/DC, was battling the early stages of dementia. Malcolm confessed that this realization broke him. For decades, his guitar had been his weapon, his shield, his voice. To feel it slipping away was like watching his own soul disappear. And yet, he carried on, touring, recording, forcing himself to hold it together. His honesty about these years was heartbreaking. He revealed that sometimes he relied on little notes or reminders tucked into his setlist to remember what came next. To the audience, he was still the rock-solid engine of AC/DC. But in truth, Malcolm admitted he was already fighting a losing battle against his own mind. Then in 2014, the inevitable came. Malcolm officially stepped away from AC/DC, replaced by his nephew Stevie Young, who carried on the family legacy. Fans were told of his dementia, but Malcolm's confessions made clear that the story was even darker than the press releases suggested. He admitted to those close to him that stepping away from the band felt like death itself. AC/DC had been his life's purpose, and without it, he was adrift. He revealed that the hardest part was knowing the riffs were still inside him, but his mind could no longer hold them. It was the cruelest fate imaginable for a man whose entire existence had been built on rhythm and precision. Even in his decline, Malcolm remained brutally honest about what AC/DC had meant and what it had cost. He confessed that the price of their legendary status had been staggering: broken friendships, addictions, estrangement from family, and ultimately his own health. He admitted that while fans saw glory, he often felt emptiness. That paradox, adored by millions but privately hollow, was one of his darkest secrets. Then there was the truth about his relationship with Angus. To the world, they were the perfect brotherly duo, bonded by blood and riffs. But Malcolm confessed that it wasn't always harmonious. The arguments, the creative clashes, the bruising demands of life on the road, they created moments of deep fracture. He admitted there were nights when he considered walking away, leaving it all behind, just to escape the pressure of being Angus's equal partner. Yet he also confessed that Angus was his anchor. No matter how fierce the fights, the music always brought them back together. Their bond was forged in fire, and though it left scars, it was unbreakable. This duality, love and war, brotherhood and rivalry, was one of the most guarded truths about AC/DC. Malcolm's confessions also stripped away the glamorous myth of rock and roll excess. He admitted that the endless stories of parties, women, and wild nights were often exaggerated, but the damage they did to the band was very real. He revealed that the drugs, the alcohol, and the reckless lifestyle were not badges of honor, but coping mechanisms. He confessed that most of those nights weren't about fun. They were about escape. Escape from grief, from exhaustion, from the crushing responsibility of keeping AC/DC alive. The darker truth was that the excess didn't give them power. It robbed them of years they might have otherwise had. Malcolm revealed that he wished he had seen that earlier, before the damage became permanent. That the band's greatest triumph was also its greatest wound. As his health declined, Malcolm became more candid about the music industry itself. He confessed that he had grown disillusioned with the machinery of it all, the labels, the promoters, the endless cycles of touring. He admitted that what began as a brotherhood of raw energy and rebellion had turned into a billion-dollar corporation, with contracts and negotiations overshadowing creativity. He revealed that he sometimes longed for the early pub days, when the band played behind chicken wire to hostile drunks, because at least then it was real. This was the cruel irony of Malcolm's life. The more successful AC/DC became, the less freedom he felt. In his last years, Malcolm also confessed a haunting truth about his own legacy. He admitted that most people would remember Angus, the flamboyant lead guitarist, the face of AC/DC. Malcolm was comfortable in the shadows, but he confessed that part of him worried his role would be forgotten. He confessed that in the end, the riffs were bigger than the pain, and while he carried regret and scars, he also carried the knowledge that his work had mattered. His guitar had been the pulse of generations, and nothing could take that away. When Malcolm Young died in 2017, the world mourned the loss of one of rock's greatest rhythm guitarists, but his confessions, revealed in the years before his passing, exposed the truth behind the legend. AC/DC was not built on invincibility, but on sacrifice. Not on endless joy, but on resilience through pain. The dark secrets he revealed showed that behind every riff, behind every anthem, there was a man who gave everything and asked for nothing in return. Malcolm Young may have lived in the shadows, but his words illuminated the hidden cost of greatness. And in the end, his confessions didn't tarnish AC/DC's legacy. They made it human. They reminded the world that behind the thunder stood a man of flesh and blood, whose honesty gave us the clearest glimpse into the soul of the band.